I'm not going to, just one quick question, because respectfully there's loads of apologies to me today, there is time, but one of the questions I asked in the first statement was, you said that the government can't, via non-statutory process, retrospectively alter or interrogate an independent commission's findings. But so that means that you can do it in a statutory way. So would the department look at that?
Well, we are proceeding in a statutory way with this proposal. This proposal will need to be based by statute. In terms of what you're suggesting, like, and I suppose it maybe comes back to a point you've raised on a number of occasions about a general repudiation of the Commission's report, and that raises really fundamental questions about if this government takes an approach of saying a report that is disagreed with this government, the government takes a decision to repudiate it. What happens in a situation when a commission of investigation report is undertaken, it criticises a future government, and that government decides to repudiate that report? A decision, and I know you may disagree with me on this, but a decision by a government to repudiate an independent commission of investigation report has huge consequences. And consequences that I think are really unforeseen. And I'd also make the point that whereas undoubtedly there are very legitimate criticisms of elements of the Commission's report, there's also material of huge value in that report as well. And I always speak back up to, for me, the fact that it is clearly documented, clearly evidenced in the report that the state knew what was happening in these institutions and failed to act, that inspectors from the Department of Local Government were writing reports saying children aren't properly fed, children are dying, mothers are dying, and that was ignored at officialdom. I don't want that repudiated, and I think that stands as a really important element. So that's on the specific issue of this report, but there is a broader issue about a government making a determination to repudiate an independent report and the precedent that sets.
There is, there's consequences.
I do have to move on. We have time though to probably be able to come back, but in fairness to Senator, I think you wanted to ask something else, and then I don't know, Senator Cronin, if you want to add anything? No? Okay.
I'm just not clear on that. Sorry, what you were saying there. If you just acknowledge that there is a mechanism to add to the report, then why are you not pursuing that?
I think someone has to go to court first. Is that? Am I understanding that correctly? That someone would actually have to take a case through the legal system to do that?
I don't think so.
Well, the reason the statement was appended was the outcome of a court process. So a judicial review took place, and in the context of that judicial review, there was an acceptance that certain survivors should have been provided with a final copy of the report and been given the opportunity to make comment on that final copy. And it was on foot of that the court, an agreement between the state and the plaintiffs in that case, that a statement would be appended to the Commission's report wherever it was published.
That's right. So there's a mechanism there for survivors to get an amendment to it. Is there a mechanism for you to do that?
Not that I'm aware.
Why can individuals do it but not the Minister?
I think the key issue in those cases was that certain survivors were identifiable from the text of the Commission's report, and because of their identifiability, they should have been consulted before the the court believed.
It's not the reason for the amendment that I'm asking about. It's the amendment itself. So there can be an amendment made. So there is a mechanism there for this to be done. That's established.
Yeah.
Because it's happened, and it's available in the Oireachtas library as well as an amendment.
It's not an amendment. The Commission's report hasn't been amended. It is a statement that sits alongside the Commission's report, outlining the dissatisfaction by these plaintiffs with the findings of certain paragraphs.
So why aren't you pursuing that approach?
Because that approach follows them having been identifiable.
But it could be for other reasons. There's a mechanism to add this to it. So why aren't you pursuing that approach not in the same way, obviously because you're not one of the survivors?
Again, that option is only open to them because they are identifiable in the report. It's not open to a minister of the government because that route in terms of being identifiable doesn't exist in that situation.
But is it possible there could be another reason other than being identifiable? For example, that the findings of the report were factually incorrect?
No.
The only way you can get it is if you're identifiable in the report?
That's my understanding, yes.
And so when you talk about the potential consequences of repudiating the report and how future governments could repudiate a report based on findings about that government, for example, that you spoke about earlier, I can acknowledge that there are consequences there, that that's something that needs to be looked at. And I fully understand what you mean in relation to that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge here today that there are consequences for not repudiating a report that has incorrect findings and that didn't even produce any kind of methodology into how they came about those findings. And I think that needs to be acknowledged because it's actually fairly sickening to hear you say in response to Senator Clonan that you would take that approach that he spoke so eloquently on in relation to memorialisation, because that approach has not been taken in relation to any of this other legislation we've been dealing with. Why just with memorialisation? Because there's no cost to the state then? Because the consequences of a report that has false, incorrect findings like that has an impact on things like redress. And like you're talking about the redress scheme there, like it's fantastic. But of course, if the report found that there was these obscene human rights violations in them, redress would be more appropriate for the crimes that were committed. But you get, you know, maybe €5,000 and that's like ridiculous. And you have to be in an institution for longer than 6 months. Again, ridiculous. So of course there are consequences to having this report that I think if we're acknowledging the consequences of potentially repudiating it, it has to be acknowledged that there are consequences of not doing that.
Again, just you refer to the issue of redress, and we didn't base our redress proposals on the Commission's report. We didn't limit ourselves to the limitations that the Commission the Commission set out. And indeed, in terms of the action plan, in terms of our response, we didn't limit ourselves to the Commission's report. So, notwithstanding that there are severe criticisms of some of the findings of the report, I think they are, as I say, expressed on the record now. The report is one part of the history of what happened in mother and baby institutions. And what we, as a government, are trying to do are trying to respond to elements of that, but respond to the broader issues that survivors have brought to us as well. And that's what we're seeking to do in terms of the birth information, in terms of the institutional burials bill.
So the amended part of the Act, the attached part, that wasn't agreed to by the government. That was forced on the Commission's report by the High Court.
The statement was it was the outcome of a settlement of that case.
But did the government have to agree to the amendment?
It was a settlement between the government and the plaintiffs, yes.
So the government agreed to adding that on, but you can't agree to adding anything else on?
Because it was part of a court, the court mandated settlement.
And you're 100% sure that you can't do it without that?
Yeah, it is the outcome of a judicial process.
And you said earlier that it wasn't brought to Cabinet, the draft memo, or that there was nothing brought to Cabinet. Was there a draft memo made for Cabinet that was never brought there?
Are you talking about in June?
In relation to, yes, sorry.
June 2021? No, there wasn't.
There was no draft memo for Cabinet?
No.
Okay.